Hello everyone, hope you are doing well. Today I am going to provide you the third part of War of Fire and Fortune. Hope that you like it. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Give us a like, and let's get started.
Chapter 15, Ret, *. The shadows swirled around me as I stepped out of my inky darkness and into my mate's tent. I had to see him one last time before returning to Ember. "You're awake," I said, stating the obvious as Kieran glanced over at me. My heart raced as I knew our time was limited. Kieran's wings unfurled, their magnificent span filling the tent. His feathers shimmered in the dim light, a breathtaking sight that never failed to leave me in awe. He strode toward me, worry etched across his perfect features. "Of course I am," he replied. "I saw Ace when Emmeline and Luana brought him through, and I felt you were here the moment you came through the shadows." "What is happening?" As he reached me, Kieran's hands cupped my face gently. The familiar touch both soothed and pained me. Knowing what I had to tell him, I leaned into his touch, savoring it. "Kieran, I started, my voice catching. Kieran's eyes searched mine, his brow furrowing deeper. "Ret, what's wrong?" he asked again, his thumbs caressing my cheeks. The tenderness in his touch nearly broke me. I closed my eyes, inhaling his familiar scent. When I opened them again, I met his gaze. "I won't be able to see you as freely," I said, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. Kieran's hand stilled on my face, his wings rustling softly behind him. My heart ached as I felt his uneasiness flow down our bond. Since we'd found each other, we'd never not been able to see each other since I had shadows. Slipping back and forth to him had become a part of our everyday routine since the rebellion had started. "I'm taking Kate's place," I continued, my voice low. "I'm going to play the part of Crow until this war is over." "No, Ret. Please, it's too dangerous," Kieran pleaded. But I had already made my decision. I cupped his face in my hands, like he did mine, feeling the warmth of his skin against my palms. My chest ached with the weight of what I had to say. "I know the risks, my love," I murmured, struggling to keep my voice steady. "But we've had all of my free time together. All the nights I've hollowed to you over the years of this war." Kieran's eyes glistened in the dim light, and I felt his pain as if it were my own. "Kate has been sacrificing everything, even his own happiness, for the rebellion, for me to be able to be with you. What's it been? Over 60 years since I found you at the rebellion camp? And now that Ace is back and Emmeline is here, I think this is where he needs to be. He deserves a break after everything he's done." I watched as Kieran absorbed my words, his beautiful features contorting with a mix of understanding and sorrow. He hung his head, his forehead touching mine. I could feel his warm breath against my lips. Kieran's voice trembled as he whispered, "How much time do we have until you leave?" My heart clenched. I must be back in Ember by morning. "I just needed to see you before I left because I don't know when I'll be back, and I wanted to give you your anniversary gift early," I said, and his eyes shimmered with unshed tears. Our anniversary was in a few weeks, but I doubted I'd be able to see him, so I wanted to do something to celebrate now. I quickly pulled the pouch out of my pocket and handed it to him to open. He pulled the string loose and let the bracelet slide into his palm. "It's lovely," he said as I grabbed it and began clipping it into place on his wrist. "And warm." He looked down at it and I smiled. "It's because I infused it with my fire. So as long as I'm alive, it holds the warmth of it of me. Until I can be with you freely again, I wanted you to have something of me. Ret, I don't like thinking about goodbyes, not like this." The tear slipped down his cheek, but I swiped it away and gave him a gentle smile. "You won't be able to get rid of me that easily, love. This isn't goodbye." I sounded reassuring, but the truth was, if Ember found out about my betrayal, they would surely end me. But I couldn't think that way. I had someone to make it back to. Kieran leaned forward and kissed me gently before he paused, and his eyes darted to the tent's entrance, gauging the darkness outside like it was an hourglass and time was slowly slipping by. I followed his gaze, feeling the urgency of dawn creeping upon us, even in the middle of the night. I'd never been one to rush. We'd always had all the time we'd needed. But now that everything was limited, I didn't know how Cade had been able to do this for so long. Without a word, Kieran moved to secure the tent. I watched him, drinking in every detail, the way his muscles flexed beneath his dark brown skin, the graceful arch of his wings. My heart raced, but it always did around him. As he turned back to me, his eyes blazed with fierce intensity that took my breath away. In 2 long strides, he closed the distance between us. His lips were on mine, no longer gentle, but desperate and hungry. I groaned, unable to hold back the flood of desire that crashed over me and flowed straight to my cock. My fingers brushed over his stubbled face as our tongues danced, tasting, exploring, memorizing as if this would be our last time together. The kiss was electric, charged with all the words we couldn't say and all the time we didn't have. He reluctantly broke away, his breath coming in short gasps. "You'll have to be quiet, my prince," he whispered, his voice husky with desire. Wouldn't want to cut our time short by waking the rebellion. Kieran's eyes glittered dangerously in the dim light. "No, my love," I countered, a wicked smile playing at the corners of my mouth. "You'll have to be quiet." My hand slid down his body, finding the hard bulge in his pants. I stroked him once, relishing the way his breath hitched, the almost imperceptible shudder that ran through his powerful frame. My fingers made quick work of the fastenings of his pants, freeing his cock. I sank to my knees before him, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. The sight of him, thick and erect, already dripping pre-cum, sent a jolt of desire through me. I leaned forward, my tongue darting out to taste him. Kieran bit back a groan, his wings trembling slightly with the effort of restraining himself. I took him into my mouth, savoring the familiar taste and weight of him. My hands gripped his thighs, steadying myself as I worshipped him with my lips and tongue. "Fuck. I love seeing you on your knees for me," Kieran hissed through clenched teeth, his voice a ragged whisper that sent shivers down my spine. I glanced up at him, my eyes locking with his jaw unhinged and hanging open. The raw intensity I saw there as he watched me nearly undid me. I redoubled my efforts, taking him deeper, determined to wring every ounce of pleasure from my mate. Kieran's hands threaded through my hair, his grip tightening as he guided my movements. The slight pain along my scalp only heightened my arousal. I was practically grinding against the air for some fucking friction. I lost myself in the rhythm, in the taste of him, in the quiet sounds of pleasure he couldn't quite suppress. My own need throbbed insistently in my pants as I devoured Kieran's length. His husky voice finally commanded, "Pull out your cock and stroke it while I fuck your face." A thrill shot through me and I obeyed, freeing my cock and gripping it tightly. Kieran's groan of approval sent vibrations through my body. "Gods, you're magnificent," he growled, fingers tingling tighter in my hair. Pumping faster, I worked myself feverishly as Kieran began to thrust in time with me, setting a punishing pace. My shadows writhed with my rising arousal, slithering down to tug Kieran's pants the rest of the way to his ankles. Then one moved to his lips, and he opened as I shoved a tendril of shadow down his throat. "Choke on it. Get it nice and wet for me." I spoke into his mind, and he moaned around my darkness, doing just as I'd said before I pulled it out, and the tendril moved and began to probe at his backside, until his taut entrance started to give way. Kieran's hips stuttered. "Red," he whimpered. "Don't stop." All I ever wanted to hear was him begging me. I might have been a prince on my knees, but I had all of the power and I was drunk on it on him. I redoubled my efforts, taking him deeper as my tendrils of darkness breached his ass. Kieran cried out, his body shaking as I went deeper, thrusting in time with my mouth. Fuck. Even if the rebellion woke up, the only sounds I ever wanted to hear were this man's whimpers for me. Pleasure coiled tighter within me with each stroke, each thrust. I could feel it building at the base of my spine. I was starting to see stars. My shadows worked Kieran as I pleasured us both, until he was a writhing, moaning mess above me. Skies, Kieran panted. I'm going to come. I hummed in agreement. We were both tethering on the edge. With one final twist of my shadows, we tumbled over together in a wave of ecstasy. I swallowed everything he gave me before pulling him out of my mouth with a pop. I moved to grab something to clean up the mess we'd made of each other, and then found Kieran waiting for me on the bed. I cleaned us up and was about to crawl in with him when he sat up and started to put his clothes back on. What's wrong? I know we don't have a lot of time, but I want to go check on Ace. I know he's in rough shape, but I just want to make my presence known and make sure Emmeline or Luana don't need anything. I knew Kieran and Ace had become close. They had shared a tent for a few months, and Kieran viewed him like a brother. I nodded and readied myself too, cloaking myself in shadow, and then we were heading to the tent they had taken him to. I kept my shadows around me because no one knew Crow as anyone other than that, which was another thing my brother and I would have to change soon. The rebellion needed to know who we actually were, and I knew it was something that would come out sooner or later. I was sure Emmeline would clock it the moment she saw me. And as we walked in, she looked over at me and her brow instantly furrowed as she looked at me wrapped in shadows like Crow. Don't freak out. It's red, I said into her mind, and her eyes widened slightly as she continued to heal Ace before focusing solely on that. She didn't seem too surprised by it, though. I was sure piecing together Kate and I being brothers and us sharing the same abilities wasn't much of a stretch. Kieran moved and fell to his knees next to Luana, letting her head rest on his shoulder as she tried to hold back her emotions and focus on Ace. Any other secrets you want to tell me? She said back through the shadows in my mind. Kate is staying at the rebellion. He won't play both sides anymore. He wants to be here with you, although that's not really a secret. She huffed under her breath at that, but kept working. Why are you here with Kieran? You weren't close with Ace, she asked, obviously not wanting to stay on the topic of Cade, and honestly, that wounded me a little. I wasn't close to Ace, but my mate was, and my brother, and technically my sister-in-law, because I was sure Cade and Emmeline would marry eventually. Well, for starters, I do care. And we wanted to check on Ace and you. I eyed her. I could tell she was still reeling from Ace coming back in the position he was in. He was in rough shape, but I wouldn't allow her to push us away. And secondly, Kieran's my mate. She sent those wide eyes my way again, looking up from healing Ace. This time, the surprise was more genuine, and it felt good to tell someone. Most people didn't know about us because of who I was. But I wanted to give Emmeline as much as I could because I knew she'd been in the dark long enough regarding Cade and what we were really doing in the background. Luana shifted, keeping most of her focus on Ace, but she glanced up, her eyes volleying between us now because we'd been talking mind to mind this whole time. And to her, we'd just been having a stare-off. Which, considering how Cade had returned Ace, an angry stare-off would be valid. I finally spoke up to both of them, my voice sifting through my shadows, sounding more like Crow. Please let us know if you need anything. We'll do what we can. I offered to wrap things up, because if I didn't, it was only a matter of time before Emmeline blew me out on a gust of wind or caught me on fire where I stood. I could practically feel the rage thrumming from her mind. I felt sorry for my brother, being on Emmeline's bad side. Yikes, I'd hate to be on the receiving end of her wrath. Kieran offered Luana a hug, and then he got to his feet and followed me out. It was something we'd learned to do in public over the years to ensure no one thought anything was going on between us. I couldn't wait for the day when the truth would be out and we could show love openly around everyone we cared about. Now there was one more person checked off the list that knew, and although Emmeline was angry at everyone, it still felt like a small weight being lifted from my shoulders. We made it back to our tent, where we made love until the sun started peeking over the horizon, and then I had to leave. Kieran pulled me into his embrace, placing my forehead against his as I faded into my hollow, and seeing the pain etched on my mate's face was something I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. And to think Cade had done this for over a century. Chapter 16, Emmeline, it powered every ounce of my healing into Ace's broken body, my hands trembling as they hovered over him. His chest barely rose and fell, each shallow breath a cruel reminder of how close I was to losing him. A sharp pang shot through my heart, and I gritted my teeth, refusing to let the tears threatening to spill blur my vision. I'd been at this for hours, the effort leaving my muscles quivering and my mind fraying at the edges. Dark spots danced at the corners of my vision, creeping closer with every surge of power I forced through him. I didn't know how much longer I could keep this up, but giving up wasn't an option. Not when his life hung by a thread. Emmeline, stop. Luana's voice sliced through the fog of my concentration. You're killing yourself. Ace wouldn't want this. I ignored her, my jaw tightening as I sent another wave of healing through my hands. My entire body ached with the effort, but I couldn't stop. I wouldn't. Luana hesitated, her presence wavering behind me. I heard her sigh, a sound heavy with resignation, before her footsteps retreated. Moments later, the tent flap flew open and Shay stormed in, her brown eyes blazing with fury. What in the hell do you think you're doing? She demanded. Now I knew why Luana had left, to try and find someone to make me listen. Saving him, I snapped, not bothering to look up. My focus was locked on Ace's face, willing him to wake up, to give me even the smallest sign that he was still in there. Unlike some people, I mean my promises when I make them. That's not fair, Shay countered, her voice cracking as she stepped closer. I was trying to protect you. I spun around, the sudden movement making me sway on my feet. Rage boiled in my veins, hot and unrelenting, drowning out the weakness that threatened to pull me under. Protect me? My voice was low. By lying to me? Her lips parted, but no words came. I took a step forward, the anger in my chest pressing against my ribs. I couldn't tell you, she said finally. It wasn't my secret to share. Asterisk, he's the fucking enemy prince, Shay. My voice cracked as I shouted. And my mate. How could you keep that from me? The words tasted bitter on my tongue, the truth of them too raw, too painful. As if summoned by the weight of his name, Cade appeared at the tent entrance. The real one, not Rhett from earlier. His broad frame was just a shadow against the flickering torchlight outside. I could instantly tell it was him. Cade's presence hit me like a storm, the familiar pull of him tangling with my own in a way that both comforted and enraged me. I swayed, exhaustion crashing over me, and his shadows darted forward to steady me. They curled around my arms, their touch gentle and hesitant, but I swatted them away. The rejection stung. I could feel it thrumming down the bond and see it in the way his shadows recoiled, but I wasn't ready. Not yet. Not when the betrayal still burned fresh in my chest. So I blocked him out, raised my mental barriers. A low groan from Ace shattered the tension like glass hitting stone. My heart seized and I spun back toward him. I reached for him again, my power already building in my palms, but Shay stepped in front of me, her eyes shining with emotion. She placed her hands on my shoulders, grounding me with her steady gaze. That's enough for now, she said, her voice firm but soft. It didn't carry her normal authority, and for some reason, that made me more emotional. Like we were both just tired. So damn tired. You need to rest, Emmeline. Luana chimed in. I'll stay with him, and I swear I'll send word if anything changes. But right now, he needs us at our best. I opened my mouth to argue with them, but they were right. My body trembled as I took a shaky step back, the last remnants of my strength slipping away. I'll be back, I whispered, my voice barely audible as I stumbled toward the tent's exit. The cool night air hit me as I brushed past Cade without so much as a glance. I could feel his eyes on me, his shadows reaching for me, but they stopped short of touching me. By the time I reached my tent, my legs were barely holding me up. I collapsed onto the cot fully clothed, the rough fabric catching on my leathers, but I didn't care. My boots dug into the thin mattress, but I was too drained to take them off. As my eyes fluttered closed, I caught a glimpse of Cade's shadowy silhouette settling outside my tent. His presence sent a confusing swirl of emotions through me. Comfort, anger, longing, but exhaustion pulled me under before I could dwell on any of it. Chapter 17, read, *. I slipped the letter onto the cold surface of my father's desk. It stated that Cade and I would be leaving to search for the Peacebringer again, and we would return when she was found. The palace halls were veiled in shadows as I hastened through them, my boots echoing against the onyx marble with urgent beats. Time was a luxury we couldn't afford. Iron Isle Harbor awaited. It would be a day's trip for my men, but I could be there in moments once I was out of sight. Rat. Nothing good ever came from that voice. I stiffened. Vala. I glanced behind me, and there she stood, her eyes two smoldering coals set in an alabaster face, watching me. Vala, I acknowledged, but I didn't stop moving. Leaving so soon? She prodded, her tone light, but I knew she was playing with me. Yes, I have matters to attend to, I replied curtly, but then she moved in front of me. Where are you going in such a hurry? I faced her fully then, seeing the glint of suspicion in her gaze. Cade and I are searching for the Peacebringer, I said, my voice steady. We are of no use here. He already left, and he left me behind to inform father and to gather some troops to meet him at the ship. Vala's eyes narrowed to slits. Her gaze probed. I held my breath. Then, as suddenly as a storm breaking, her lips curled into a smile, slicing through the unease. Well then, she began, her voice like silk. You wouldn't mind me joining you, would you? Fuck, this wasn't part of the plan. My heart quickened. I wasn't prepared for any games. This exit was supposed to be quick, but I didn't have any logical reason to tell her no. Aren't you needed here with father? I dared to ask, hoping to keep her at the palace. Vala's smile flickered, not reaching the cold depths of her eyes. No, he's been extra busy planning the next invasion for Woodhaven. She stepped closer. I can come back in a few weeks when we have the next war meeting, but until then, I think this would be more fun. Don't you, brother? Oh, it's a splendid idea. We could travel together. I forced the smile onto my face. Perfect. The single word felt like a shard of glass on my tongue. I had planned to vanish into a hollow and emerge at the harbor to await the men on the ship. But to have Vala as my travel companion was as unexpected as it was unwelcome. I couldn't use my shadows around her. And if she didn't find Cade on the ship, the whole plan would be ruined before it ever really started. Then it's settled, she said, satisfaction curling the edges of her voice. My mind scrambled for an escape as I nodded in feigned agreement. I'd have to send word to Cade, and soon. A shout from down the hall fractured the tense silence. A soldier, his armor clanging in his haste, bellowed from down the hall. I cursed internally when I realized it was one of her trusted men. Princess, the prisoner is gone. Vala's gaze snapped to me. The playfulness that had danced in her eyes moments ago vanished. Where is Cade? Her words, filled with venom, fell between us like heavy stones in still water. The visceral heat of her anger licked at my skin, and I felt the weight of her accusation pressing down on me. She thought we had done it, and she wasn't wrong, but I couldn't have her knowing that. I told you. He already left. I kept everything about myself neutral. Vala's eyes narrowed. He took him, didn't he? I fixed my gaze on Vala. Her eyes seemed to glow like twin embers with her rage. No, we have nothing to do with your prisoner going missing. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a long journey ahead. You can come or not. It's your choice. My voice remained steady. Her lips parted. She couldn't read me, so instead she turned, a swift pivot on her heel, to face her soldier. Prepare our men. We are returning to the ships. Yes, Princess. He bowed slightly before running off to do as he'd been told. She turned to me and leaned in close, the chill of her breath brushing against my ear. If I find out you and Cade had something to do with this, I'll kill you both. The words were a hissed whisper, yet she drew back with the hint of a grin that didn't reach her eyes. I must speak to Father before I go, but I'll meet you at the stables. I nodded and took a step away, feeling the heat of her threat like a brand upon my skin. Gods, she was a fucking psychopath. And it seemed to only grow worse with time. When had she become a monster? I offered her no retort before I walked away. Once I was out of Vala's piercing stare and the prying eyes of the palace, I ducked into an alcove shrouded in darkness. My hands trembled as I fished out the scrap of parchment and charcoal from my tunic. I scrawled a warning to Cade. Complications? Vala is accompanying me to the docks. Be there in a day's time. Rolling the message tight, I summoned a small hollow and coaxed forth a shadow crow. Its form wavered like black smoke in the dim lightning before taking the message in its beak. Fly swift, I murmured, releasing it. The shadow crow flew into the hollow and the shadows dissipated. My pulse quieted, but the dread lingered. I took a steadying breath, and with one last glance at the palace, I headed to the stables. This was going to be a long fucking trip. Chapter 18, Emmeline. The sky was painted in shades of blood and ash. My body protested every movement as I emerged from my tent, muscles aching from the strain of using up all of my strength yesterday. Near my tent's entrance, a small bedroll lay crumpled on the ground. Cade had stayed close through the night. My chest tightened at the sight. He was gone now, but his presence lingered, the faint tug of our bond reminding me he was near, watching, waiting. His shadows, though they thought they were being sneaky, felt like whispers brushing against my skin, and I shivered involuntarily. The weight in my chest was unbearable, but I kept my mental barriers in place. I refused to let him in, so I threw myself into earthbending practice, hoping to drown the storm of emotions clawing at my insides. The familiar rhythm steadied my trembling hands as I hurled boulders into the horizon and raised walls of stone around me. Each of my strikes was a futile attempt to vent my anger, my frustration, my sadness. Sweat poured down my back, soaking through my clothes as I pushed harder. The exertion numbing me in ways nothing else could, but no matter how much I moved, no matter how much I fought, I couldn't escape the thoughts circling my mind like vultures. The bond between Cade and me thrummed faintly in the background, an unrelenting ache that refused to be silenced. But I kept shoving it down, down, down. How had he done this for so long? I fell to my knees by the river to grab something to drink and splash some water on my face. Sitting back, I tried to catch my breath when wind whipped at me from my right, and Betos landed with a thud, blocking the sun's rays. I looked up at him, and he dropped a fish head into my lap, covered in dragon drool. Gross. Listen, you guys might be okay with regurgitated snacks, but I think I'll pass. He cocked his head to the side as if saying, but the head's your favorite part. You haven't eaten today, and if you don't eat something, I'll eat you. Did I really get all of that from a single look from a dragon? Yes, since we were able to communicate outside of Magni Island, I had improvised quite a bit, and most of the time I'd been right when asking him, and he would nod in agreement. He huffed a plume of smoke down over me, and the scent of it was oddly comforting and warm. All right, if you bring me a fresh fish, I will eat it before heading to Ace's tent, okay? I conceded, and he was in the sky before I could say another word. A few moments passed before he was back with the fish still flapping when he dropped it on the shore next to me. I cleaned it, used my bending to cook it, and ate it quickly so Beatus would stop being a mother hen. Once he seemed satisfied, I stood, and he placed his forehead against mine in farewell, before getting back to his nightly rounds around the mountains for the rebellion. Since coming here with me, he checked in with me every day. Occasionally, we would go for a ride before Ace returned from Ember, but for the most part, he and Emerus stayed busy together. Part of me wondered if they liked each other. Beatus was an adult now, despite their age difference by the time evening descended. I was bone-tired, but no closer to finding peace. My footsteps felt heavy as I made my way to Ace. The sight that greeted me stopped me in my tracks. Luana sat slumped in a chair beside him, her face pale and drawn with exhaustion. She must have stayed there all night. Guilt hit me like a blow to the stomach, twisting and churning as I approached. She gave me a tired smile as I knelt beside Ace. I reached for my bending, calling it forth as my hands hovered over his battered body. The faint glow of my bending lit up the tent, and I focused on each flicker, willing it to bring him back. Emlyn. Kate's voice echoed down our bond, soft but insistent. I'd been keeping him blocked, but being as tired as I was, and because I was using even more energy now, he must have been able to slip through. The sound of it made me freeze, my fingers faltering midair. His tone was laced with something I couldn't bear to name, something that tightened the knot in my chest. Please, we need to talk. There's nothing to say, I snapped aloud. Without hesitation, I slammed my mental barriers back into place, severing the connection, blocking him out. I was so fucking tired. I forced myself to focus on the patterns of pale light swirling from my hands into Ace's still form. It was easier than acknowledging the ache Cade's voice had left behind, the silence stretched thin around us. But I could feel Cade nearby, hovering just out of sight. The bond was muted, but his presence was impossible to ignore, like the faint hum of static in the air. He wasn't going to leave, but he wasn't going to push either. At least not yet. I knew I couldn't stay away from him forever, as the hours dragged on. My power began to falter. The blue glow sputtered and dimmed, and my hands trembled as I tried to hold on. My vision blurred, and the room tilted dangerously. As a wave of dizziness washed over me, just as my knees threatened to buckle, Luana's hand closed over mine. Her touch was firm, grounding me in a way. That's enough, she said, her voice steady. You've done all you can for today. I nodded weakly, too drained to argue. She was right. I knew she was, but the guilt still pressed heavily on my chest. Somehow I forced myself to my feet, though my legs felt like they might give out at any moment. It had only been a day, but I'd do this for however long it took. The walk back to my tent was a blur. My exhaustion was so consuming that I barely registered Cade's presence following me. He didn't say a word, but his shadows rippled in the corner of my vision, never straying far. Anytime I would slightly stumble, they were there to straighten me, and I was too tired to fight them. When I finally collapsed onto my cot, I didn't even bother removing my boots, same as last night. I lay there staring at the ceiling. Turning my head, I saw Cade's silhouette just beyond the tent flap. His broad shoulders hunched as he sat on the ground. My chest tightened painfully. I hated him for keeping secrets, for breaking the fragile trust between us. But I hated myself more for how much I missed him. Hot, angry tears welled in my eyes, spilling down my cheeks as I turned away from the sight of him. I buried my face in the coarse fabric of the cot, wishing the world would just stop spinning for a moment. He was right there, so close and yet so impossibly far away. And what made it worse was knowing that I wanted him. Even now, after everything, I wanted him so badly, you know. I wonder if Willow saw all this when she told me who and what you were to me all those years ago. She only told me the bare minimum, and it was enough for her to know I would do everything in my power to keep you safe. But she never mentioned if you would forgive me once all this was over. Asterisk, it would make sense for him to have a relationship with Willow, considering Marlena had told us that her and Willow had been an ember before Willow had escaped. Cade had probably grown up around her. Had he stopped to watch her send off, not only for my benefit, but for his final goodbye too, for a woman that had shaped us into what the future needed? Emotion clogged my throat as Cade continued. The only thing she would ever say was that it would work out in the end, that it would be worth it. I want you to know, Emmeline, that she was right, because no matter what happens, I will always be here. I'll always be yours, no matter your decision. I held back a sob and curled up on the bed, wrapping myself with my thin blanket. I wasn't ready to accept his apology. The wounds were still too raw, and the thought of letting him in again terrified me more than anything else. I clenched my fists, willing the angry tears to stop, but they kept coming. And then darkness flitted around me, and I could feel him there. Well, not him, but his shadows. Sleep may win Sorara, and then sleep found me. I tossed and turned until my skin was drenched in sweat from my nightmares. Which was odd, because when Cade was around, my nightmares were usually non-existent. I peeled myself from my bed. My boots greeted me first, lying next to my bedside along with my leathers. I hadn't taken them off before falling asleep. Cade must have come in here after he helped me drift off. With swift, practiced movements, I donned them both, and I took a deep breath. Maybe I should talk to Cade. A sigh slipped through my lips. I edged out of my tent, a shroud of darkness still blanketing the world outside. The sun was hiding beyond the horizon, and Cade's bedroll lay empty. That was odd, too. The past few days, he hadn't left my side, and I couldn't feel him like I normally could. He wasn't close. My chest tightened with unease. Had something happened? I moved through the still sleeping camp, making my way to the practice grounds. I needed to relax, and the only way I could think to do that was by unleashing. Training after nightmares had always helped me relax. I was still exhausted, but I let the well of power crack open in my chest. Water spiraled from the air, wrapping around me in liquid ribbons. Earth heaved under my command, rising like stone soldiers. Fire danced between my fingers, a wild, crackling heat. And air was my breath, my pulse, spinning into vortexes around me that echoed my inner turmoil. Each element bowed to my will, bending with graceful fury as I poured every fragment of emotion into their movements. Sweat beaded on my brow, muscles screamed their protests, but I commanded them all until the only thing I could feel was exhaustion. My knees wobbled and I collapsed, my knees meeting the earth with a jarring thud. My breathing ragged, I listened to the sounds of the early morning. The crickets chirped while the birds started their early songs. I felt the simmering anger and sorrow within me ebb, washed away by the tide of exertion that left me hollow, yet oddly satisfied. After a few moments, I picked myself up and made way to the river. Cold water slapped against my skin as I scrubbed away the remnants of dirt and sweat from training. My fingers trembled slightly, not from the chill, but from the sheer force of will it took to keep my thoughts at bay. I dressed hurriedly, the fabric clinging to my dampened skin, and set out toward Ace's tent, where I planned on healing him for the rest of the day. Rebellion life stirred quietly around me. Embers of campfires glowed softly, and the occasional groups of our people moved with purpose to whatever tasks they'd been given for the day. Asterisk, I rounded a corner and nearly collided with Atreya. Her blue eyes held mine for a fleeting moment before she offered up a small, knowing smile. It was a silent acknowledgement of the unspoken tension that hung between us all like a shroud. "Hey," I called out, my voice betraying a hint of desperation I hadn't intended. She halted, her gaze turning curious. "Do you know where Kate is?" "I didn't see him this morning. He's at Iron Isle Harbor. There was a hiccup in our plans and he had to make an appearance for Vala." "He what?" The two words splintered in my throat. Shards of panic embedding deep within me at the thought of Cade, or anyone I cared about, being anywhere near Vala, but he'd also just left again, without saying goodbye. The anger boiled my blood anew, every muscle tensed, ready to spring to race to him and bring him back, but also to stab him in the fucking leg for once again just disappearing on me. "Don't worry." Atreya's voice was soothing, and I knew she could see the silent battle happening within me. "He'll be back today once the ships sail." He made it clear he wasn't going to be overly involved anymore. "Thank you for telling me." My head bobbed in a nod. I felt so fucking hollow as my feet carried me forward. I couldn't win. When he was here, I felt everything and I had to keep it buried. But when he was too far away, I hated not being able to know, to feel him close by. Ace's tent was just ahead, and I ducked inside, where the air clung heavy with the scent of antiseptics and herbs. Luana stood by the bedside, her hands gentle as she wiped away the remnants of some type of salve that helped with burns. When I wasn't healing him, Luana was using every type of healing medicine we had. I moved over to the bed and focused on Ace as my hands began to glow pale blue. My only goal for today was for Ace to open his eyes. Chapter 19, Cade, asterisk, the camp lay still, save for the whispering leaves and the occasional snort of a slumbering horse. My feet carried me swiftly toward Ace's tent. I hesitated at the entrance, the fabric flapping softly against my hand as if urging me onward. The musty scent of medicinal herbs and dried blood assaulted my senses as I stepped inside. My eyes adjusted to the still form lying on the makeshift bed Ace, who had become more than a friend to me over the weeks he'd been in Vala's cell. Luana sat next to him. Her head lay heavy upon her arm, cradling the edge of the bed where Ace lay motionless. Moonlight trickled in through a slit in the tent, casting a pale glow upon her face, revealing her eyes, red and swollen. So much sorrow and pain was written on her face, and I couldn't imagine seeing Emmeline in such a state. I swallowed down the image. Luana didn't move, didn't blink, her gaze fixed on Ace's peaceful-looking face, as if she were pleading silently for his eyes to open. I swallowed the lump forming in my throat. My boots rooted to the dirt, reluctant to intrude upon her when she was so weighed down with grief. But maybe a small reprieve would be good for her. I cleared my throat, the sound abrasive in the quiet. Sniffling, she jolted upright and her eyes met mine. "Crow, hi, sorry." Her voice cracked and I lifted my hand. "No need to apologize, Lou. I understand," I said. My gaze slid past her, settling on where Ace's chest rose and fell. "Do you mind if I have a minute alone with him?" She gave a slow, silent nod as she stood, casting one more glance down at him before looking to me. "I could use some air. Take all the time you need." She granted me a smile, small and fragile, as if she were on the edge of breaking all over again. I watched her go, and then I moved to the chair she had just been in and took my seat. My hands rested on my knees, fingers drumming an uneven cadence while I studied his face, searching for any flicker of the cheeky jackass that had always burned so fiercely behind those closed eyelids. "Hey," I murmured, feeling a little silly that I was talking to him, knowing he probably couldn't hear anything I would be saying. But over the past few weeks, he had been the only person I'd had to talk to, and I couldn't deny that I missed our conversations. I leaned in, my voice barely more than a whisper against the silence. I severely fucked up, I admitted, raking a hand through my hair with a rough tug dot asterisk, right about now. You'd have that look, the one that cuts deeper than any blade, and you'd lay out exactly how I botched things with Emmeline, I said, the corner of my mouth twitching in a semblance of a smile. A pained chuckle huffed from my chest as thoughts of our banter within the cold, damp cells of the palace lanced through my thoughts. My eyes roved over him, taking in the bandages, the burns, his wings being gone. The laughter died in my throat, replaced by a tightening coil of remorse. I'm so sorry, Ace, I murmured, head bowed as if in prayer to some absent god. A moment passed. I wish you would wake up and tell me what to do. My fingers curled into fists. I failed you and Emmeline. Gods, I may have lost her forever. I don't know if she'd ever forgive me for what happened to you. The words came faster, desperation sharpening them. She's relentless, healing your wounds and practicing her bending day and night. And I'm just here, floundering in the dark. It's ironic, isn't it? How I'm sitting in the very thing I wield, and yet I've never felt so fucking powerless. Sighing, I straightened, looking down at Ace. I miss you, brother, regardless of how Emmeline felt about me. I knew how she felt about him, and that was what he was to me now. I would never give up on Emmeline, just like he wouldn't. It was probably one of the only things we could ever agree on. And I wouldn't give up on him, just like Emmeline wouldn't. I paused, jaw clenched. I've got to leave for Iron Isle Harbor, but I'll return as soon as possible. Emmeline will be here to continue working on you, and I'll be back to check on you both, I explained before steeling myself. I stood, the chair scraping softly against the earthy floor as I moved away. I tried to tell her I'd be leaving, but she keeps shutting me out. You think you could tell her for me? I asked, huffing out a breath. See you soon. The tent flap fell shut with a muted thud behind me. I opened my hollow and was gone with my next step, asterisk. Chapter 20, Rhett. The wind clawed at my cloak as I trudged through the last stretch of jagged terrain. Iron Isle Harbor finally cresting into view. My heart hammered against my ribs, every beat a drum of dread resonating through me. Almost there, Vala said, her voice slicing through the salt-heavy air as she glanced over at me with a smug smirk. She was so sure of herself. I knew what she was thinking. She was certain she was going to find Ace on Cade's ship and label us as traitors. All I could do was hope that Cade had gotten my message and would show, because if he didn't, this whole plan was about to go to shit. I hoped that damned letter had been enough to sway him. The doubt gnawed at me. Rhett, Vala called, her voice closer now. Keep up. I quickened my pace, knowing my thoughts had slowed me down. The market swelled before us, a cacophony of shouts and clanks, of sellers hawking their wares and the clash of steel from somewhere within the maze. And beyond it all, our ship awaited. The dark metal glinting in the rising sun. We pressed on, weaving through the crowd, the tang of fish and sweat assailing my senses. My gaze swept over the mass of the deck, hoping to sense Cade, searching for any hint of his shadows, but I couldn't see anything. We reached the docks, the ship now towering above us, its hull groaning with the gentle sway of the water. Cade had to be there. If he wasn't, I'd pretty much be at the hands of Vala's wrath, which I'd done my best to avoid most of my life. Come on, Vala urged, her impatience showing. With a final deep breath, I steeled myself for what lay ahead, and together we climbed aboard. I could feel her eyes drilling into every soldier that was Cade's, every crevice of the vessel, as if she could somehow will Ace from his hiding place with her gaze alone. Search it, she commanded, and like hounds released by their master, her soldiers scattered, eager to please their princess. The chaos that ensued was merciless. They overturned crates, rifled through bunks, their hands leading disorder wherever they went, I followed Vala as we made for the main quarters. Cade's. The door met her boot and burst open, the sound of violent thud. And there he was, Cade. He sat nonchalantly at his desk, quill in hand, and cast an indifferent glance toward the intrusion. Asterisk. Can I help you, Vala? His voice cut through the tension. She prowled forward, a predator in her own right, but uncertainty flickered in her eyes. She combed through the room, closet doors flung open, linens tossed aside. With each empty space, her frustration grew. She huffed as she stormed back toward the doorway. Her search yielded nothing but the scraps of her own desperation. I had to place a hand over my face to hide the small grin tugging at my lips, but I schooled my features quickly. Nothing at all, brother. Just wanted to ensure you weren't keeping any stowaways on your ship, she spat out, the words dripping with venom. Just then, 2 soldiers emerged from behind her. With a single shake of their heads, they delivered the verdict Vala dreaded. The prisoner was not here. Very well, she hissed. Well, now that you've made a mess of my ship, if you'd be so kind as to leave. We'd like to get a move on, Cade said as he leaned forward in his chair. His fingers steepled, eyes locked onto her sister's face. Before I go, where do you plan to start your search? She asked, her voice a controlled calm that belied the rage I was sure was coiling beneath her skin. Wood Heaven, Cade replied curtly. That was the last place she was spotted, so it makes sense to start there. She narrowed her eyes at him, the corners of her lips twitching with a cruel sort of mirth. I let Father know. With you being so close to our next target, I'm sure he'll have special plans for you. I'll be waiting, he said, his voice laced with icy resolve that chilled the very marrow of my bones. Now leave. With a snarl, Vala turned, her soldiers falling into step behind her like the little, obedient hounds of war that they were. They marched out of the room, their footsteps echoing as they receded. The door closed, and I finally released a breath. Fuck, I said, running my hands through my hair. You couldn't have let me know in some way that you were coming? I thought I was going to die the whole trip here. Cade chuckled. I know I said I wouldn't be going back and forth, brother, but I wouldn't throw you to the wolves like that. I'll do what needs to be done to uphold appearances, but all the heavy lifting is on your shoulders now. He pulled out a bottle of amber liquid and poured us both a drink. We clinked our glasses and took them back in one go. Understood, I replied and poured myself another to take the rest of the edge off from the trip here. We waited until Vala and her men were gone before Cade slipped into his hollow to go back to the rebellion. Chapter 21, Emmeline. Asterisk exhaustion clawed at my limbs, a relentless beast that sought to drag me down into its depths. For days now, if I wasn't practicing my bending, I was healing Ace until I was spent. At least I was persistent. All of his bleeding had stopped. I'd watched as the angry red burns had transitioned to tender scabs, then scars. Broken bones and wounds had knitted under my touch. Luana fell asleep in the chair next to his bed. I told her to get some rest because she was going to fall over if she didn't. Before she went to bed, she helped me wrap his chest and back to support the small stumps starting to appear. Hopefully his wings would grow back completely and he wouldn't have any issues flying again. Despite how well the healing sessions had been going, though, Ace was still asleep. His silence was a void, swallowing my hopes whole. I yearned for his eyes to flicker open, for his hands to sign something to me. I craved the sight of that infuriating, endearing grin that could cut through the gloom of any bad day. Darkness crept into the edges of my vision. I blinked rapidly, fighting it off. How long would this take? Would he wake up at all? Had we been too late all along? Would his mind remain lost? Damn it, Ace, wake up, I growled, my voice a raw edge of frustration. His chest rose and fell, but he still didn't stir. Tears threatened to spill over, I clenched my fists, nails digging into my trembling palms, as if trying to anchor myself to something solid. Amidst the chaos of emotions happening in my chest, everyone had lied. Shay kept the rebellion's secrets, and so did Atreya. And then Cade left, then lied and left me again. In that charged moment, as if summoned by my thoughts, I sensed Cade's presence slicing through the haze of my exhaustion. I could feel his hollow on the other side of the tent. A burst of raw energy surged through my veins. With a cry torn from the depths of my soul, I unleashed it at Cade. The force of my power sent him tumbling backward out of the tent, a grunt escaping him as he hit the ground. My breaths came in sharp gasps. I closed the distance between us, standing over him where he lay sprawled in his shadows. "Get up," I spat, darkness curling at the edges of my vision, but I pushed past it and let the well of power in me open and swell. "It's about time you acknowledged me," Cade quipped, a lopsided grin reclaiming his lips as he righted himself. "Not exactly how I imagined it going, but I think you need to get it out, so come on." He readied for me, my fingers curled into fists, and a torrent of power erupted from within me, cascading outward as my eyes ignited with that otherworldly glow. The Peacebringer. Lunging forward, I struck him clean across the jaw, a satisfying crack that honestly made me feel better. I lunged again, but Cade twisted and turned, his movements fluid shadows around me. He wasn't retaliating, merely dancing away from each of my blows. He had left me, lied to me, come back promising to stay, and then left again. What if he hadn't come back? What if Vala had hurt him like she had Ace? What if I'd lost him too? I was so fucking angry, but I knew this wasn't fueled simply by all the betrayal. It was fear. Vala had taken so much from me, already ripped apart pieces of my soul, until I barely recognized the person left behind. If she had taken Cade too, if she had stolen one more person I loved, I wouldn't have been able to bear it. Tears blurred my vision as they streaked down my face. The wind howled through the camp, a vicious roaring thing that bent the trees and sent embers scattering from the fire pits. The ground trembled beneath my feet, answering the rage that coursed through my veins. And in the distance, the river ran wild, its current a deafening rush against the storm that was me. Flames licked high into the night sky, burning so hot they turned blue. The heat searing against my skin, and then I broke. I pounded my fists against Cade's chest, each strike fueled by grief, fury, and everything I had held back for too long. With a ragged sob, I tore down the mental barrier between us, letting our bond flood open. Every emotion, every thought, every shattered piece of my heart crashed into him all at once. The anger, the betrayal, the longing, the love, every messy piece of it. Cade staggered back, his breath hitching, his eyes widening as my raw and untamed heart funneled straight into him. Then, fingers wrapped around my wrist, stopping me, not Cade's. His touch was familiar, something I knew better than my own heartbeat. No, this was weaker, shaking slightly. My breath caught as I turned, the world around me fading into nothing but the person in front of me. Ace. He was awake and standing next to me. Gripped my wrist to stop me from unleashing any more on Cade. My power still pulsed through me, glowing in my veins, but my anger crumbled like ash in the wind. My chest caved as I lunged forward, slamming into him, my arms wrapping around him so tightly I thought I might never let go. He was warm, solid, alive. A sob tore from my throat. Ace held me as tightly as he could despite his condition. His body was shaking against mine, but I didn't care. I buried my face in his shoulder, inhaling the scent of him, the proof that he was here, that I hadn't lost him too. I know he's an idiot, but if anyone's taking him out, it's me. He signed with his free hand. A watery laugh broke through the tension. And Cade chuckled from somewhere behind me, but I just clung to Ace, my fingers digging into his wrapped back as if letting go would shatter me all over again. He's alive. He's alive. He's alive. Oh, shut up, I murmured, a half-hearted reprimand drowned in relief. My grip on him tightened, as though I needed to continue to prove to myself that he was awake. Dot around us. The camp quieted as the wind slowed. The fires went out, and the river stopped roaring. Ace was alive, awake, and here, cradled in my arms. That was what mattered. The rest could wait. For now, I clung to my brother, the steady thrum of his heart promising that some battles, at least, had been won. Asterisk. Chapter 22. Emmeline wrapped my arm under Ace's, supporting his weight as we stumbled back into his tent. His breaths were shallow, but his steps were strong considering everything he had been through. He paused to catch his breath as I helped him sit on the edge of the bed. Hard lines of fatigue were etched in lines across his face. I moved to examine his back, wanting to check on the stumps that had already started to form where his wings should be. Ace glanced over his shoulder to look at me, and his eyes lingered on the feathers in my hair. His feathers. A boulder threatened to clog my throat as I went to grab for them, so he wouldn't have to relive the loss of his beautiful wings again. But he grabbed my wrist, stopping me before I could. No, he signed, his eyes growing glassy. I want you to wear my feathers proudly. You are someone I cherish. Never remove them. I swallowed down the lump in my throat and nodded, pulling him into another hug. I released him and wanted to tend to his back again, but he shook his head. You've done enough. You need rest. You look and smell like shit, he signed, and I scowled. How I missed your charm, brother, I signed and followed Ace's gaze over to the chair next to his bed. The dim light of a lantern cast a soft glow on Luana, curled up, her chest rising and falling with deep, even breaths. She hadn't stirred since we'd arrived. She has stayed by your side from the moment you made it back. His eyes softened, the edges of his mouth lifting in a small, grateful smile that didn't quite reach his weary eyes. I could feel her, he signed back. She kept our bond open when Cade brought me back. Could you not feel it before you left? I asked. I could, he signed, and I saw the ghost of hesitation in the twitch of his fingers. But we had been taking things slow. She wasn't ready to let me in yet. She was closed off from me. Understanding dawned on me since I'd been doing the same thing with Cade. I nodded. Well, I'll let you get some rest and have some alone time with your mate. And you should talk to yours. Emmeline. There was a hint of mischief in the arch of his brow, but I just turned away to leave because I didn't have anything to say to that. An admission of my own vulnerabilities I wasn't ready to confront. I wasn't ready to talk to Cade yet, but at least he'd felt everything I had. I had sent all the rage and sadness to him down the pond. Asterisk, when I made it back to my tent. His bedroll was outside, but he wasn't there. I assumed he'd decided to give me some space after the incident today. Maybe he was waiting until I went to bed so I wouldn't have to see him. That would be understandable. A wave of relief should have swelled within me. Instead, gnawing emptiness gnashed at my insides. I wanted him here. I wanted him to talk to me, fight me, fucking hold me. Something, but what the hell did I expect when I pushed the man away at every opportunity I had? I'd wanted distance, and he was giving it to me. I lingered outside the tent flap, staring at the space where he had been sleeping. In the dim light, I could almost imagine the gentle rise and fall of his chest, the shadows dancing across his sharp features. A shiver raced through me, though whether from cold or longing, I couldn't tell. Perhaps this was for the best. This space between us would give me time to sift through all of my emotions. Even though the thought sounded reasonable, it tasted bitter on my tongue. I needed to bathe. A dip in the river would surely help me feel better. Besides, Ace's words about my stench clung to my conscience. They'd been harsh, but he hadn't been wrong. I grabbed a bundle of clothes to change into from inside my tent before making the small trek to the river. The night air nipped at my skin as I wove through the sleeping camp. Reaching the riverbank, I stripped off my soiled clothes. The water greeted me with a cool caress as I stepped in, moonlight painting silver streaks across the surface. I submerged, letting the current strip away the grime and sweat of the past few days. My fingers worked through my hair, untangling the knots. When I emerged, the chill of the night wrapped around me, but I felt a little better. I dried and dressed hastily, the fabric rough against my tender flesh, and turned back toward the camp. I'd spoken too soon. Emptiness still carved hollows within me. And for a moment, I allowed myself to pretend that I was standing in a hollow with Crow. Before I knew the truth about everything, just enjoying the peaceful serenity of it, as I neared my tent, I sensed a familiar presence. Kate's shadows flitted about. They hadn't strayed far, it seemed. Or perhaps they sought me out, independent of his will. Mischievous little things. Though I was sure Cade wanted to keep an eye on me after everything I'd sent down our connection. I'd be worried about me too. His shadows swirling around me coaxed a smile onto my lips, a small bloom of warmth in the frost of my heart. Upon reaching my tent, I slipped inside, but they stayed out until I held the flap open and eyed them, giving them a silent invitation to enter. It wasn't much, but it was a start to letting Cade back in. They followed me over to my bedroll and swished around joyfully, as if they were happy to be here. They curled around my neck and caressed my cheek, and I swallowed the emotion building in my throat. I rolled over, and then I saw Cade's form on the outside of my tent, taking his spot on the bedroll, lying down, readying for bed. He had waited for me. I closed my eyes before I could overthink it, and sleep claimed me quickly. Asterisk. Chapter 23, Ace. Asterisk Luana's chest rose and fell with the gentle rhythm of sleep, her dark curls spilling over her face like ink in water. I sat propped on the makeshift bed, muscles aching, skin pulled tight over freshly healed wounds that screamed with every slight movement. But this faint discomfort was a mere echo of the agony that had once been my constant companion within the cold, unforgiving stone of my cell. I couldn't resist. The pull to touch her was instinctual, an innate need that thrummed through my veins. My hand trembled as I reached out, brushing my fingertips along the warmth of her jaw. Her lashes fluttered, and then her eyes snapped open. She lunged forward, her arms finding their way around me in an embrace that melded desperation with tenderness. I pulled her into my lap, and she easily straddled me. I felt the press of her body against my core, a sweet torment to my senses. Her lips traced the line of my neck, the curve of my cheek, before claiming my lips in a kiss that seared through the remnants of any darkness clinging to my weary soul. I clung to her as if she were the very essence of life itself. Tears shimmered in her eyes, quivering like dewdrops on the edge of a leaf before they spilled over. She pulled back to look at me. "I thought I lost you." "I'm right here, love," I signed to her. A sob broke from her chest as I cupped her cheek and pulled her lips against mine once more. Kissing her with our bond open ignited a flame within me. My body instantly responded, the hard length of my cock tightened to my trousers, and I knew she could feel it pressing insistently against her front. Her hips rolled as she moved to hold me closer, and I couldn't suppress the growl that worked its way up my throat. Luana pulled back, her breath hitching, her gaze locked with mine. Concern flickered across her face, a flash of guilt in her tear-streaked eyes. "I'm so sorry. Did I hurt you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, her hands hovering over the scars that now marred my flesh. With a grin, I shifted her weight until she was fully seated on my lap. She felt the undeniable evidence of my arousal, my cock pressing directly against her center through the thin barrier of our clothes. "Does it feel like you hurt me?" I signed to her, and a blush bloomed across her dark brown skin, spreading like wildfire as a smile lit up her face. Cupping her cheek, I drew her back into the kiss, tenderly coaxing her with my tongue. My soul poured into the exchange, every emotion channeled through the connection of our lips. And then I reached down the bond we shared, that she had kept vulnerably open for me, asterisk as our minds melded and intertwined. I sank into the lush depths of her consciousness. We were lost together, adrift in the seas of each other's essence. The threads of our connection wove together into an unbreakable tether of light. Her emotions crashed into me, waves of love, longing, relief, and mine surged into her with equal force. The world around us faded, leaving only the raw intensity of our bond. The kiss broke, our breaths mingling in the charged air as we placed our foreheads together. The thread between us that had barely tugged before now roared like a violent storm within my veins. She wanted me, all of me, and it was a craving that resonated with every fiber of my being. "Are you sure?" I asked down the bond, my voice echoing through the silent chamber of our linked souls. Her eyes widened in awe. "Your voice? I can hear it in my head," she whispered. "Do you like the way it sounds?" "Yes. And yes, Ace, I want you, all of you." She breathed into the charged space between us. "I wasn't ready before, and then after you left, I wished I'd given you all of me. I wanted to be with you, to let you in, but then when I got the news of your capture, I didn't know if I'd get you back. I didn't know if I'd lost the opportunity to be with you, my mate. And now I never want to be without you again." Tears welled in my eyes. "Say it again," I commanded down the bond, and a small smile curled on her lips. "My mate." I never knew two simple words could be my undoing. I captured her lips with mine and kissed her like a man starved of air, and I needed her to breathe. Luana wrapped her arms around me, her hips pressing insistently against mine. The hard length of my cock was undeniable. I wanted all of our clothes off. I wanted to fuck her slowly, make love to her passionately, keep her in my bed and worship her for days until we were both completely spent. But then she trailed a hand down my back and sharp pain jolted through me. I tensed, a hiss escaping through gritted teeth. She halted, concern flashing in her hazel eyes. Those golden flecks shined as she pulled back. Her lips, swollen from our kisses, parted slightly as she peered over my shoulder, examining the patchwork of healing wounds that marred my flesh. "Luana," I choked out down the bond. Despite the ache, I craved her touch, her nearness, her. I wanted no, I needed her. "Come back," I urged. The sensation was intoxicating, knowing she heard me from within. A connection so deep it blurred the lines of where I ended and she began. Her fingers hovered inches from the raw redness of my scars. "You are in no condition for sex, Ace," she whispered in my mind before switching to using her actual voice. "We've waited this long, so we can wait a little longer. I don't want to see you in any more pain." A deep growl clawed its way up from my chest. I wanted her, every fiber of my being straining against the weakness that held me prisoner within my own body. The thought of entwining with her, soul and body, for days unending was a maddening hunger I had never felt for anybody before. "You must be hungry. You haven't eaten." "Let me go get you something," she murmured, concern etching soft grooves around her eyes. She stood to move, but I was stubborn. Defiance propelled me upward. My muscles screamed in protest, but I quashed them. "No," I said down the bond. Her eyes caught mine, wide with surprise. I drew her back, imprisoning her in my arms and shifting her so her ass was on the bed. If I could not claim my mate as I pleased, I would give her any pleasure I could for now to satiate both of us. "No need. I have the meal I want right here." My thoughts poured into her mind, and her lips parted when she realized what I wanted. Her scent changed as her arousal filled the tent. My gaze locked with hers, a silent question hanging heavy in the air between us. I knew she wanted me, but I would always ask her permission first. The night dress she wore clung to her like a second skin, and I desperately wanted to rip it off with my teeth. I was like a starved animal. Every fiber of my being hungered for her. A beat passed before she nodded, a subtle dip of her chin granting the consent I craved. My fingers trembled as they reached for the hem of her nightgown. The fabric was delicate against my calloused hands. I peeled the night dress upward, unveiling the expanse of her dark skin. The sight of her lay bare before me. I'd never seen anything so goddamned perfect. Not even the views of Heaven's Reach could touch her beauty. Wilena. I breathed her name down our connection, a hello invocation as I drank in the vision of her. She was my salvation and my undoing, and I was going to worship her. I dropped to my knees. My mate. I sent my words to her as she dipped her head back and spread her legs for me. Asterisk. Chapter 24, Luana. Asterisk. I perched on the edge of the makeshift bed, watching Ace's eyes roam over my body. He fell to his knees before me as if he were a man before an altar. With his calloused hands, he guided my thighs to rest upon his broad shoulders. With a single stroke of his tongue, a fire ignited inside me. A guttural moan escaped my lips as I arched off the bed. Ace's grip tightened on my hips, anchoring me to this world as he feasted with the hunger of a man starved. I surrendered to the sensation, entwining my fingers in his dark, unkempt hair, holding him to me. My body writhed against the relentless strokes of his needy tongue, each lap and swirl pushing me further into the abyss of ecstasy. I couldn't stop myself from grinding against his face. Without warning, he added his fingers into the mix, plunging them into me, hitting all the perfect spots. The pumping of his hand, coupled with the insistent lapping of his tongue, shattered the fragile dam within me. Waves of release crashed over me, leaving me gasping, shuddering, drowning in bliss. As the tremors subsided, Ace's tender ministrations did not stop. He helped clean the remnants of my release with gentle, careful strokes until the final pulses of pleasure left my trembling body. I thought it would soothe the fire in me, but it only made me want him more. He stood, and I captured his mouth, tasting the remnants of my release on his tongue. I hummed and turned him toward the bed. It was his turn to sit down as I kissed him slowly and undid his pants. Luana, you don't, he said down the bond. I want to. I cut him off in my mind and gripped his cock in my hand, which had him groaning. I leaned down and licked at the crown, which had him cursing internally, but it only made me want to torment him more. Give him the same pleasure he had wrung from me. I finally wrapped my mouth around his cock and hollowed out my cheeks. I used one hand to grip his thigh to hold me up while using the other to snake between my legs, because I desperately wished his cock were there right now. I needed more dot instead. I found my clit and rubbed in circles as I bobbed my head and deep-throated him in long, slow draws. I purred around his cock, so hungry for him. I pulled back, and my tongue flicked out to lick over his balls, which had him hissing and gripping the nape of my neck. Humming against his skin, I dragged my tongue up his shaft, loving the taste of him as more pre-cum leaked from his tip, and then I sucked him back into my mouth. His hips started to pump in tandem with the swirl of my fingers, and I knew he was close. The wave of pleasure built within me again, and I moaned around his cock. Asterisk. Fuck. Ace sent down the bond as his hips jerked, and I swallowed down his release as it shot down my throat. I cried out then as I came undone again from another swirl of my fingers. I released his cock and kissed up his chest where his muscles were quivering. He was exhausted, and I knew he needed rest, but I couldn't stop myself. He gripped my wrist and pulled my fingers to his lips so he could suck my release from them, and then pulled me into a gentle kiss. He stood as we helped each other clean up before we made our way back to the bed. Ace groaned when he finally lay down, clearly spent, and a worm of guilt slithered through me. Don't do that, he said down the bond, and I hadn't realized those thoughts had slipped through. I wanted you, Luana. I will continue to heal, and I will be all right, he said to me in my mind, and I nodded before he pulled me against his chest. How are the holes in the bed? Should I make them bigger? I asked, and he shook his head. They're comfortable, he sighed with his eyes closed. I could tell he was already starting to drift. I had created 2 holes in the earth of makeshift bed so he could lie on his back, without it hurting the stumps that had started to grow. Hopefully, once they were more healed, his wings would sprout through again. But until then, the holes would keep them safe while he slept. Thank you, he murmured down the bond, and I brushed my fingers against his strong jaw, my mate. I murmured before sleep claimed both of us, asterisk. Chapter 25, Vala, Iron Isle Harbor, had been a futile endeavor, a waste of my precious time and energy. I stormed through the palace's massive doors, my boots echoing off the floors, each step punctuating my frustration. How could he have vanished? I looked everywhere. He couldn't have just disappeared unless... As I approached the study, the scent of parchment and smoldering embers did little to soothe me as it had when I'd been a child. Though nothing really soothed me anymore. I was constantly trying to feel something, anything, and the only thing I could conjure up was rage, pushing open the door without ceremony. I found my father hunched over scattered maps. Father, there is no conceivable way he escaped on his own. Valos glanced up, his eyes revealing a flicker of concern before his mask of indifference settled back into place. Vala, what are you implying? I leaned across the desk, my hands braced against the worn wood, feeling the pulse of the enchantment in the room. That prisoner should have been dead from what I inflicted upon him, yet he's gone. There's a traitor among us, and I knew. But he wouldn't go for that yet. It's one of my brothers. After Cade had brought the Peacebringer to the catacombs, I had no doubt that he had let his affections get the better of him. She had made my wicked prince of a brother bend and break in a way I'd never seen before. I'd watched them during their time here from a distance and seen every single small expression that had crossed his face. I'd seen it. He cares for her, and we all know love is the most dangerous thing of all, don't we? I don't want this. Please stop. The voice was so weak, it hardly ever spoke up anymore, but it never deterred me. Nothing would stop me. I would be the best. Silence stretched between us. My father's gaze searched mine, seeking a truth I already held close. That is a heavy accusation, princess. He murmured, fingers curling into fists atop the map-strewn desk. I cannot fathom one of my sons, but if there is a snake in our midst, we should take care of it. My heart pounded with thrill of the hunt. This was the game I excelled at: deception, manipulation, killing. Everything he had made me into, forced me into. No, he loved me and I would be the best. I heard the whimpers of the thing that was always watching from inside my head, and I wished she'd just shut up. What do you have in mind? I have far more important matters to tend to than your prisoner and hunch. The Peacebringer is gone, and the next weapon I plan to use against Woodhaven is almost complete. The final war is upon us. Then let this be an extension of your strategy, I countered swiftly, tapping a finger against the map, marking imaginary lines where our enemies might falter. Very well, Valos conceded after a moment weighted with contemplation. His hand swept across the map. What are you thinking? A smile touched my lips. I suggest a coup. Consider it a test of loyalty. Dispatch separate missives to each of my brothers, crafted with your finest enchantments, so that the contents cannot be spoken about to each other. We both know how you love to toy with magic. Give them separate war plans. Whatever gets back to the rebellion shall reveal the traitor. If none do, then I was wrong. I was never wrong, and I would prove to him that I wasn't, just like I had time and time again that I was the best out of my siblings. I straightened up, my gaze piercing his. We stationed soldiers for an ambush. If an attack comes, they strike. And if it doesn't, we can trust neither of my brothers as the spy. His jaw tightened, a flicker of uncertainty in his otherwise stoic face. If this doesn't work, Vala, we will have squandered precious resources. Days of travel, men's lives, supplies, all for nothing. Father, the risk is necessary, I insisted. If I'm right, we could very well take down the rebellion before the final war even begins. We could capture the Peacebringer, and then we would be unstoppable against Woodhaven. Asterisk, the silence between us stretched. I could see the cogs turning behind my father's eyes as he weighed the cost against the potential gain. For a long moment, Valos remained motionless. Then slowly he nodded, a subtle dip of his head that set my heart hammering against my rib cage. He rose to his feet, the heavy fabric of his royal robes sliding against the floor as he leaned forward over his maps. I watched him closely as his fingers hovered over the parchment. Then they moved with purpose, marking 2 distinct locations. My gaze followed as he drew a third mark at the center of the traveling grounds, the perfect place for an ambush. A trap ready to be sprung? Here, he murmured, more to himself than to me, and here. His touch left dark stains behind. Our forces will lie in wait, but we will move when the ships are ready. This can be our practice run with them. I stood beside him now, our shoulders nearly touching, perfect. The word left my lips while a smile stretched over my features like a predator baring its teeth. Chapter 26, Emmeline, asterisk. My muscles ached with the sweet pain of exertion, and sweat trailed down my spine as I focused on the earth beneath my feet. Luana's stance mirrored mine, her concentration palpable in the charged air. We had been nothing but fluid movements and raw power all morning. Again, I panted, the words barely escaping before I thrust my palms forward, bending the ground to ripple in a wave of jagged stone toward Luana. She countered effortlessly, her arms sweeping up as a wall of soil rose to meet my attack, absorbing the impact with a thunderous crash that resonated through the clearing. She grinned at me, eyes alight with challenge. Then, from the fringe of the shadows cast by the gnarled trees encircling us, Cade emerged, his presence shifting the air. I felt him before I saw him. He leaned against a tree, arms crossed, a smirk playing on his lips as he watched us. For a moment, I faltered, distracted by the intensity of his gaze. But the fight wasn't over, joining us. I called out, a challenge of my own. Without a word, Cade unfolded himself from his casual lean, stepping into the light. Shadows clung to him like a second skin. With a subtle flick of his wrist, they surged forward, snaking across the ground and intertwining with our battlefield. Luana's eyes widened slightly in surprise, but she was quick to adapt, shifting her tactics to account for this new, unpredictable element. I dodged a tendril of darkness that sought to ensnare my ankle, leaping back and forcing the ground to rise in spikes. But Cade was always one step ahead, his control over his shadows so precise. "Show me what you've got." "Bunny," Cade taunted, amusement lacing his voice. Shadows danced around me, brushing against my skin like whispers of silk, tempting and teasing. They were cool where I burned from exertion, darkness to my light. Every move I made was matched and countered, a relentless assault that pushed me to the brink dot as I pivoted to avoid another shadowy strike. I caught Cade's eye, and there was something there, and for a fleeting moment, it held me captive. Luana gradually receded like the tide pulling back from the shore, leaving me alone on the battlegrounds with Cade. The distance between us closed as we continued to attack, until he grabbed me and twisted me around, pinning me to his front, just like he had on the ship. which felt like a lifetime ago. Adrenaline spiked in me and I twisted, landing a blow to his chest. A grunt escaped him, but Cade was quick to recover, his reflexes sharp. Before I knew it, he had maneuvered close to me again, pinning me against the solid wall of his torso and chest. Now I was facing him. I could feel his warm breath against my face, our noses almost touching. I could feel the warmth of his body against mine. The contact, after the last few weeks of keeping careful distance, seared through my senses. His body was a perfect mold against mine, every contour fitting where I ached with fatigue. And now I was aching with something else. I couldn't stop the warmth that bloomed within me, a yearning for his hands to explore places they had no business being. We're training. I don't need this right now. Inappropriate thoughts swirled in my head, desires I had done well to keep stifled now clawing their way to the surface. And Cade, damn him, grinned, his expression knowing, as if he'd slipped into my thoughts and read them like a book. I checked the wall in my mind to make sure I hadn't let it down before Ace's steps interrupted us. He approached, his strides confident and strong, even after all he'd been, though. I blinked away the trance Cade's proximity had put me in, turning to face my friend. "Let's start training again," Ace insisted, but I shook my head. "No. Ace, you're not ready yet." I've healed him the best I could these last few weeks. It kept me distracted from the man at my back. His wings were out now. All his feathers had grown back, seeing him now. I wouldn't have believed the state he was in when he came back from Ember. He frowned, flexing muscles that had not seen much use since he'd returned. "My wings aren't ready for flying yet. I need to strengthen my back muscles, and I could use one-on-one sparring, especially if we don't know what's coming." His eyes met mine. I glanced at Luana. Double quotes fine. "I'll leave you two to it then," I announced with a knowing smirk, eyeing Ace and Luana as they squared off in the center of the clearing. The pair had been inseparable since his healing had begun, their touches lingering, eyes locked in silent conversations. It was almost comical how transparent they were, their hands and mouths betraying any sense of decorum when they thought no one was watching. Ace sent me a rueful look, his head shaking slightly as if to chide me for my teasing. But there was a glint in his eye, an acknowledgement of the little trap I'd set for him. "Good luck, brother," I signed. He wouldn't be getting much training in if he was up against Lou. He wouldn't be able to keep his hands to himself. My laughter bubbled up as I turned on my heel and strode away from the grounds. Cade's presence was close behind. "Cade, I'm exhausted," I muttered more to myself than to him as we left. It was late summer now. The weather had been hot. I was excited for it to start cooling down. I need to wash off this day. "Don't wait up." Before the words fully escaped my lips, strong arms enveloped me, lifting me. A hollow sensation enveloped us. My heart leapt into my throat, and I couldn't suppress the squeal that followed as we reappeared beside the river, the cool air brushing against my heated skin. "Cade." My protest died on the wind as he set me down gently, the grass soft beneath my boots. The water babbled nearby. Shadows danced across Cade's features, making him appear both alluring and dangerous. "What are you doing?" I asked, the words catching in my throat as Cade's hands hovered at the hem of my shirt. I had done well keeping him out the last few weeks, only focusing on training or Ace or, well, anything other than him. But each day he worked his way back into my heart, and if I was being honest with myself, he'd never left. "Taking care of you," he said softly, and his eyes searched mine for consent. There was weight to his gaze, a silent plea that begged me to let him close, even if just for a little while. I nodded, unable to find my voice. "I've watched you take care of everyone but yourself for weeks." His fingers brushed against my skin as he lifted the fabric over my head. The cool air kissed where his touch lingered, sending a shiver down my spine. Asterisk, asterisk. Chapter 27, read, asterisk. The flutter of wings broke the silence in Cade's quarters, drawing my attention to the small porthole where a raven had squeezed through. It perched on the edge of the wooden desk, its black feathers glistening with an unnatural silver sheen, an enchantment of some sort. This missive must have been urgent for it to be enchanted dot with deft fingers. I untied the leather strap around its leg, freeing the rolled parchment. The raven ruffled its feathers impatiently as if urging me to move faster. I unraveling the letter, and the script danced before my eyes. It was a battle plan to go up against Woodhave and Dot. My father's hand was clear in the meticulously detailed assault, aimed to cripple Woodhaven before delivering a death blow with a final battle in a few weeks' time. He wanted to catch them off guard first, to weaken them before coming back with a second, bigger regiment. I snatched maps from beneath a pile of scattered papers on Cade's desk, their edges worn from frequent study these past few weeks. My gaze darted across the terrain depicted in the letter. There was an opening, a vulnerability the rebellion could use to their advantage. My heart pounded with a mix of dread and determination as I traced our potential counterstrike. If we made the trek, we could cut him off before they ever made it to the capital city. We could stop some of my father's armies before they ever made it to the final battle. I'd take any advantage to help us win this. Black ink spilled across the paper as I charted the plans on my own map. I needed to show this to Atreya. The raven squawked, jolting me, reminding me time was a luxury we couldn't afford. Patience, I muttered, scribbling a terse response that I'd be waiting and ready to move whenever my father was. Securing it to the bird, I watched as it launched itself back through the tiny window, disappearing into the brine-scented air. The missive would reach my father, and he would remain none the wiser of my true allegiance. I threw on a fey glamour of my brother, something I'd done countless times over the years of our sneaking around. The salty scent of the sea clung to my skin as I strode onto the deck, where soldiers busied themselves with the ceaseless tasks of the day. My boots thudded against the metal, a dull rhythm that matched the drumming of my thoughts. "Hear me!" My voice cut through the din of rattling chains and the shoveling of coal. Weathered faces turned to look at me. In 1 week, we converge with Valus's soldiers on Woodhaven. Sharpen your steel and harden your hearts. We will be going to battle. Murmurs rippled through their ranks. But I didn't have time to say more. I needed to get to Atreya with this new information now. I retreated from their fervor, slipping back into Cade's quarters. The door closed with a click, sealing away the world. I fixed my gaze upon the shadows gathered in the corner of the room. Releasing my glamour, I stepped forward and let darkness swallow me whole. The hollow embraced me and spit me out quickly. I didn't have much time before I needed to be back on the ship. The shadows receded, spilling me into a tent dimly lit by flickering candlelight. Parchment rustled as Atreya lifted her head and her eyes met mine. She pushed aside scrolls etched with strategies. Her brow furrowed as she looked at me. She knew I had something. "Everhet, what's wrong?" she asked. I extended the crinkled letter toward Atreya. "News from father," I said, my voice a low growl of warning. "It was enchanted, so I do not know if you'll be able to read it without it turning to ash." But she snatched it with calloused fingers, eyes narrowing as she scanned the words. I thought it odd that she'd been able to take it. I thought the message would have only been able to be read by me, but I guess maybe it was just to keep anyone from reading it before it got to whom it was addressed to. Her gaze flickered to mine as if wanting me to continue with whatever plan I had conjured. And I left thoughts about the enchantment alone. I pulled out the map I had drawn on and laid it over everything else on her table, pointing to where we could intercept them. If we march for 3 days, We can catch them a day before they reach the capital city and take down whatever attack they have planned before it even begins. How many men do you think could be ready in 3 days? I could spare 300. I want to ensure we take all of them out. Did your father mention anything about numbers? How many troops he's sending? It only says a small force. By my understanding, this is just to weaken Woodhaven, keep them on their toes before the final battle he has planned. Do you know when that is? It might be unwise to go after them right now, if this is all just a show that your father is putting on. Gods, how he loves his shows. She mumbled that last bit under her breath, but it's an opportunity to take down some of his forces right under their noses. I think we should take advantage of it. Atreya walked the length of her desk and then stopped at the end and leaned her body weight against the wood. Her mind spun before she finally spoke. I'll ready the rebellion. We will see you there in 6 days. Baron walked in through the tent flap, then as if she'd summoned him. She conveyed the plan before sending him off. After her nod of approval, I hollowed back to the ship. Chapter 28, Cade. I cleaned and sharpened my twin swords and placed them in their sheaths. The final act of my preparation before tomorrow's march. The weight of them was a familiar comfort, almost as soothing as the last few nights I'd spent curled around Emmeline in her tent. A small smile curved my lips. We were finally making progress, and I hated that now that we were. We would be marching to battle tomorrow morning, without warning. A raven burst through the open flap of my tent, its feathers shimmering with a silvery enchantment. Instinctively, my hand shot out, grasping the parchment tied to its leg. I didn't bother with unwrapping it. I bent fire to my palm, letting my flames eat up the letter as it crumbled to ash upon my touch, the remnants slipping through my fingers. I knew it had to hold the same words Rhett had read and delivered to Atreya already. I was sure the distance to me had delayed the bird's arrival. It mattered little now. Our plans had already been set. Time was a luxury we couldn't afford, and even if I wanted to send word back, which I didn't, it wouldn't get there before the battle. Plus, Rhett had already sent a response. He could shoulder the weight of our choices now. I'd shed mine when I'd stepped down from my role. A quick inspection of the bird let me know the enchantment had been broken. The silvery shimmer gone, and it deserved freedom. I flicked my wrists, ushering it toward the sky, where it disappeared into the trees, across the camp. Emmeline's laughter mingled with Ace's deeper chuckles, a sight that sent pangs through my chest of both joy and agony. She turned, her gaze catching mine, and the world narrowed to the space between us. Fuck, she was everything to me. I couldn't get that kiss out of my head. I wanted to lay her down and show her all the ways I could worship her, but I wasn't going to fuck up all the progress we had made by rushing her. I knew Ace had teased her about something because Emmeline's hand playfully shoved against his chest, his frame shaking with his laughter. The past few weeks had been difficult, but it had been worth it. First, she'd allowed my shadows in, and now she had started letting me sleep in her tent through the night. I wanted more. I wanted all of her desperately, but I had waited most of my life for her. I could wait a little longer. With the bag clutched firmly in my grasp, I strode from the tent toward her. Emmeline was the reason my heart beat, the echo of my soul, and I would follow her into the dark, unending night. Chapter 29, Emmeline. The firelight flickered against our silhouettes as I faced Shay. Her hand rested protectively over the swell of her large belly. She met my eyes with stubborn resolve that only deepened my concern. Shay, you need to consider staying behind, I urged. You're further along now. It's not safe. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and she shook her head. No, Emmeline, I'm seeing this through till the end. I've told you that. The strength in her tone told me there was no use arguing with her. She wouldn't listen to me. I glanced to Baron. Are you not going to stop her? I called out as he walked past, his tall frame briefly blocking the light of the fire. Baron paused, turning back to glance at Shay, then at me. A heavy sigh escaped him, his shoulders sagging slightly beneath the weight of his leathers. "You think I can stop her?" He gave a rueful chuckle, though there was no mirth in his eyes. "Everything you've told her, I've already said tenfold. She's unstoppable. Now I'm just trying to come to terms with it." Ace sauntered up to us then. "Looks like we're all going," he signed with a small smile, and I groaned in frustration, my heart sinking. Shay being ready to pop any day, and Ace still recovering from his recent injuries. Didn't need to be fighting right now. Damn the mother. "Ace." My words trailed off, lost beneath a cacophony of clanging armor and muffled preparations. Two of the people I cherished were adamant about marching into battle, and I felt powerless to stop them. "You guys will be the death of me," I muttered. Shay's laughter fluttered past me as she trailed after Baron. I turned to face Ace, and his arms were raised in a half shrug, offering mock surrender. "Ugh, listen," he sighed. "We're all adults here. We can make decisions. Don't worry." Before I could muster a retort, his arms wrapped around me in a hug. The warmth of his body against mine did little to chase away the dread I was feeling. "If you die," I whispered fiercely against the leather of his cuirass, "I will bring you back to life and kill you myself." He chuckled and pulled away from our embrace, his eyes twinkling. "I think you need to bring your mate back to life first. Poor guy looks like he's going through hell watching you from a distance." Ace chuckled again, but I shoved at his chest just as said mate started striding over behind us. I couldn't deny what Ace had said was true. Asterisk, his once pristine prince garb had been traded out for battle leathers. Stubble had formed along his jawline that I could see even through his shadows. His fingers had raked through his hair one too many times, leaving it wild and UNTAMED as he stood before me, his hands clenched at his sides. Our bond hummed against the walls I'd placed in my mind. I watched, almost entranced, as he restrained the instinctive need to touch, to reassure me. It was something I'd noticed since I'd let him in my tent. Even after everything, he didn't initiate contact between us. He waited for me to do it. I didn't think there was a living soul as patient as he was. "Would you like to grab some dinner with me?" His question took me by surprise. The mighty Cad, Prince of Ember, now as tentative as a boy. I was going to go for a hunt, catch something fresh. His offer hung there. It was a sliver of normalcy, a momentary reprieve from the darkness that we were going to be marching to. I could see it in his eyes, the silent plea to just be with him. I nodded, a smile curving my lips, and extended my hand toward his. His eyes flickered with warmth, something akin to hope as I weaved my fingers through his. It was another step in the right direction, and I was excited, hopeful even, that soon maybe all of this would be behind us. Maybe I could finally let go and just forgive. Asterisk, we had been marching for 2 days. The thick underbrush of the forest protesting against every step. My legs burned with fatigue, and the weight of my weapons seemed to grow heavier with each mile we covered. We were a day's trek from the spot where we planned to ambush the Ember soldiers before they reached Woodhaven. Cade had taken position at the rear, not far behind where I trudged along. His presence cast a long shadow that stretched out to me, and I could feel the intensity of his gaze, even without turning around. But I did turn occasionally, and each time I caught his eyes locked onto mine, practically burning me with the amount of tension thrumming between us. After dinner last night, I'd let down my walls inside my mind, and although I had better control over it now, I could still feel him. His sorrow, his longing, his love. Every night since I'd let him in my tent and kissed him, the bond had only grown more insistent. It clawed at my chest consistently to be with him, but I'd still only allowed sleeping on the same bed and minor touches throughout the day. The bond was like a beast, though, that continued to grow hungrier and hungrier for us to solidify it. Sure, we'd had sex, but I hadn't known he was my mate, and he had been suppressing it. Now, it only yearned for us to be together, beside me. Ace's blades he kept strapped to his chest would occasionally rub together as he walked, the sound mingling with the rustle of leaves and the soft murmurs of the others. Kieran walked on my other side, his usual stoic demeanor cracked by the waves of restlessness that rolled off him. I watched his fingers twitch and brush over the bracelet on his wrist. He had been on edge the entire trip. Silence had settled over us. With each step, Kate's gaze continued to sear into my back, a heat that seemed to pierce through my flesh and bones. Gods, that man! I couldn't handle the gnawing tension in the air anymore, so I finally spoke up. "Are you all right?" I asked Kieran. He glanced at me then, his eyes distant. "Yeah, just concerned," he replied, his voice barely above a murmur. "I haven't heard anything from Red. He normally communicates with me through his shadows, but nothing has come to me for our entire trip." "I'm sure he's fine," I assured him. "He will meet us when we get there. Maybe he just hasn't gotten the chance to sneak away to communicate." The words felt hollow, even as they spilled from my lips. I knew better than anyone how quick and easy it was for Kate to communicate with his shadows. Asterisk worry crossed Kieran's face before he masked it with a nod. But not before I saw the tumult of his thoughts mirrored in his eyes. Doubt started to worm its way into my chest again, and with a clenched jaw, I forced it down. We didn't have time to think the worst. We were readying for battle. Atreya stopped and turned from her place at the front. Everyone's eyes were immediately on her, her very presence demanding authority. An earth dryad made the ground rumble, and then she was being lifted on a pedestal of dirt before she began addressing everyone. "We will stop and take a break here in the clearing," she signed and said, her stern eyes sweeping over us. "But don't get too comfortable. We will continue our journey in 1 hour." The earth lowered her back to our level as some started to disperse, while others stayed where they were and quietly chattered amongst themselves. Ace, with his easy swagger, drifted toward Luana, intent on sharing a moment of reprieve. I could practically smell the sex wafting off both of them. Then, a fleeting touch from shadows grazed my hand. Sending a jolt up my arm, Cade stood next to me, close enough for me to sense the turmoil roiling beneath his calm exterior even more than before. "Can I?" Cade's voice was a whisper against the forest. His hand hovered in the space between us. I didn't take it. Instead, I couldn't restrain myself any longer. I surged forward and wrapped my arms around him, pulling him into an embrace that melded our bodies. I settled my head against his chest, and his breath hitched as he folded me in his arms with desperation that mirrored my own, his head buried in the crook of my neck, his breath warm against my cheek. He murmured a curse, his voice rough like gravel. The rest of his words were muffled against my skin. Asterisk. I know there's no apology in the world that could ever truly erase the pain I've caused, no words that could undo what's been done. The world seemed to shrink until there was nothing but Cade and the heartache that still faintly throbbed in my chest. But still, with everything in me, I need you to hear this. I am so deeply, achingly sorry for what happened to Ace this entire trip. The only thing I've wanted, the only thing my heart has reached for is you. His fingers tightened on my back, as if he could press the truth into my very bones. I only want to hold you close, look into your eyes, and finally say what's been buried in my chest for far too long. I love you. More than I've ever known how to say. Tears welled in my eyes, mingling with the sweat and grime of the days we'd spent marching. He pulled back just enough to search my gaze. But I also need you to know that I'm not sorry for the distance I put between us, for lying about who I was, what I was to you. I would walk through every year of torment all over again. His voice broke, every stretch of silence in my shadows, every mile of distance if it meant you were safe. If I could still live in a world where you existed, where there was still the smallest chance of hearing your laugh, knowing you were out there. His hands shook as they cupped my face, thumbs brushing away the moisture that had escaped my lashes. But losing you when Ace returned, when you were right here in front of me, his eyes brimmed with sorrow. The shadows around us seemed to still. Nothing I've endured, nothing I ever could, would match the unbearable ache of not having you when you're right here. I watched the struggle play across his features, but I know you need time, and I will take your anger, your sorrow, your pain, for however long you need me to, because I love you, Emmeline. His voice trembled on my name. I love you, and I'll take whatever you can give me. Kate, my voice was a whisper. I was about to tell him how much I loved him too, how much I wanted to move past all of this, how much I wanted him. Wait. Kate's voice sliced through the tender moment. His body tensed and his gaze shifted, eyes narrowing into slits as he stared intently beyond the trees. What is it? I whispered. Kate's shadows skittered across the forest floor like a nest of snakes. The mood shifted palpably. My fingers grazed the hilt of my axe, my instincts going into overdrive. Ember soldiers. They're already here. A vibration tremored through the ground beneath my boots, subtle at first, then growing stronger. They knew we were coming and were going to cut us off. And by the sounds of it, there would be more soldiers than we'd anticipated. Cade, I murmured, but he was already moving, shadows pulling around him like dark tentacles ready to do his bidding. They darted through the trees as I grabbed my battle axe. Atreya's shout pierced the stillness, making everyone snap into formation. Weapons gleamed with lethal promise, hands steady despite the tremors beneath us. To my right, Ace palmed two of his daggers, and I could feel the wind building around him as he made a few others float in the air surrounding him. His wings weren't healed enough to fly yet, so he would be on the ground with us. Kieran's fingers twitched, and then he glanced at me, the raw power of his wind ready to unleash destruction on our enemy. But I could see the pain in his eyes. Everhet wasn't here, which meant something hadn't gone to plan. And then the Ember soldiers came, swarming us in the clearing like locusts. Their numbers were staggering, a sea of malice that threatened to drown us in blood and iron. Vala led them with a smirk on her lips, as if she'd already won. Across the clearing, Atreya stood resolute. Her eyes met mine. There was no fear there, only the unyielding will of a leader who would see us through. Come hell or high water, her nod was subtle, but it was enough to covey her commands. We would not falter. We would not break. Then, as if that were a signal for the world to descend into madness, everything erupted. The ground shook with the charge of our feet, and the air filled with the screech of swords being drawn and the roar of men as everyone collided in battle.
And with that, we did reach the end of this video. Hope you did like it. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and give us a like. See you next time. Bye.